Hi everybody, Kimberly Crawford here for My Favorite Things Stamps, and today I want to show you how to make this really great rainbow background, and it's made using the premium dye inks from My Favorite Things Stamps. And I wanted to make a rainbow background because it coordinates so well with these new images being released called Rainbow of Happiness. Here are the stamps, and then the coordinating color the rainbow, which has the words that can also fit with the stamps. Besides just using stamps, you could use die cut words like I did on my card. And I want to show you how easy it is to create this really great watercolor rainbow background. I don't know about you, but I have loved rainbows since I was a little girl. My first bedroom was in rainbow color, and I just love it. So this is a really fun and easy technique, and all you're going to need is some premium dye inks, an acrylic block, a water bottle with water in it, and some watercolor paper. So let's go ahead and get started. I am using a long acrylic block for this because I want to have a larger coverage of ink as I work down my watercolor paper. The other thing I want to make sure is watercolor paper has two sides. It has one side that's much more textured and toothy, and another side that is smoother. And because I'm going to stamp on this after, I want to make sure that I'm using the smooth side to do this technique on. I'm going to start at the top, and I'm going to choose my Wild Cherry red ink. And I'm going to apply the ink directly to the acrylic block. I found when I was doing this that if I covered the entire block, I was getting too much color, and it wasn't working for my 5.5 inch length of my card piece. So I just found that if I put some here, it was a much easier thing to do. Now I've got my ink here, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my water bottle, and I'm going to spray some water on here to kind of activate and make these wet. And this is kind of a look preference thing. As much water as you want to add, or as little amount of water as you want to add. The more water you add, the more water, the less intense the color. The less water, the more intense color. So I try to go about in the middle here and might be a little bit lighter. And I'm going to go to the very top of my paper and mush this down and kind of move my block a little bit to get that color flowing. All right, so there we go. Now, there's a couple things you can do here. You can let this dry as is and let these colors move and flow if you want to. If you don't want this intense of a color, take a paper towel and go in and pick up some of the color. And because I got a pretty straight line for my block, I'm actually going to kind of move my colors just a little bit with the paper towel over the edge. And there we go. I'm going to wipe everything up because I'm going to go on and continue down with my next color. My next color is going to be Orange Fizz. Once again, I'm going to apply the ink to my block and spritz it with water. And go ahead and apply it. And I'm going to flip it over and go this way and let that run stay. It's okay that that runner is there because you want this color to move. And see how I'm mushing the color? I'm allowing that color to bleed over the other color so that it blends together. Once again, go ahead. If you got extra color in spots you don't want it, grab your paper towel. You could also go back over and spread out the color a little bit more. Don't be afraid to use your block as a tool and to use it to help spread your color. Let's continue on. I'm going to go to and wipe your color away so that you don't get weird mixes on your surface. I'm going to go to Lemon Drop. And for my Lemon Drop, you know, this yellow is not as strong, as intense color-wise as my Wild Cherry and my Orange Fizz. So I'm going to do a little less water so that I get a much stronger yellow color. There we go. So I've got a much more intense yellow color, and I don't like that line, so I'm just going to put my block back down again, kind of push that color around a little bit. There we go. If it's too intense, go ahead with your water bottle and squirt some of that color around with your water bottle. So you have a lot of tools at your disposal to create these backgrounds, and a lot of ways to move the color around and spread the color and create the look that you want to look. And now I have been using dye inks because the dye inks are the ones that are going to react with the water like this. The other ink formulas will not. I'm moving on to sour apple, so keep that in mind that you're going to want to use your dye inks. You know, you could also, if you wanted to, I like the control of the ink pad, but you could also use your re-inker. You could just put your re-inkers down and pick the color up with your block that way too. I'm going to go in with my green and let it drip. I'm a perfectionist, and sometimes the dripping kind of scares me a little bit, and then once I see the actual results of it, I'm always really happy with how it turns out, and it always just looks so neat and just organic. I don't know how to describe it. I just really like the way that the color flows, and I've just learned to kind of let it flow and figure out where it wants to go, and it always just turns out so neat looking. Pick up some of that color. All right, we're going to continue on. A couple more colors. I've got Summer Splash here. I also like how well these colors blend together. They seem to, the different formulas really work well. They seem to flow together nicely. And I'm going to force that color back a little bit. See, I love how you can see them just working and reacting and creating this really interesting look. I didn't like how light blue that the color is there. It's not as intense. I'm going to put more ink on my block and just a little bit of water and try to add a little bit more intensity to it. And I'm going to see how I can move my block around and see where the color is sitting, kind of move that and make that work for me a little bit. So don't be afraid to go back in here and work some of that color around. And let's finish up the rest of the background. I'm going to use some Lavender Fields. I tried Wild Wisteria and it was a little too light. So I went back with Lavender Fields and it worked well, but I did find that I needed to add just a little bit more water to make the color a little less intense. And here we go. And I'm going to go off the paper a little bit here. And let that kind of drip there. And I can grab the color, kind of work that around. And I see a little bit of a line here. So let's move this color over with my block a little bit and spread it out. And wipe up all the extra color. They're sitting here, and just let this go. Now, there's a couple things you could do to get this background ready to do the rest of the card making on it. You could absolutely heat it with a heat tool and get the color to dry and to set quickly. I like to just let it dry and set it aside and work with it once it is dry. So I'm going to set it aside, and let's talk about the rest of the elements that I placed on the card. So you can see on my card here, I've got a sentiment and then this die cut word. So I started with the die cut word, and I use black licorice cardstock, and I use the dies from Color My World, and there is the choice of rainbow or rainbows, and I love that because they work with the sentiment so well. So I adhered that down, and then I stamped the sentiment over the top. I used the hybrid black licorice ink to do that because I know that this ink formula is going to work with this background. It's not going to resist the water from the ink, and that isn't going to affect it. So that's why I want to make sure when I create these backgrounds and I'm stamping a sentiment, no matter what color I'm stamping the sentiment in, I'm going to use the hybrid black licorice ink. I also added a few clouds here. Those are from Dynamics Puffy Clouds. And I adhered some of them flat, and then I gave some of them a little bit of dimension with foam tape and foam squares to raise them up. And the final thing that I added was some clear sequins. And one of the things I do when I put sequins on is I try to highlight the important part of the card, and I try to make kind of a visual triangle around things. And I did that to highlight the sentiment, the most important part of our card, to bring that out and to make sure that the focus of everything is on our sentiment. So there we go. We have this really cool way to use our acrylic blocks and our dye-based inks to create an amazing background full of bright, colorful sunshine rainbows. Have fun making this background, and remember, if you were looking for any of the supplies used on this project, look below the video in the description and you'll be linked up to the products. And if you have any other questions, make sure you check us out at mftstamps.com.